She walked into the courtroom with no legal team, no high-powered attorneys, no entourage. Just a plain leather folder full of evidence, dates, rulings, receipts, and a voice sharpened by years of watching people get overlooked. And within minutes, even Justice Elena Kagan began to wonder if silencing her had ever been the right call. It hadn't started in Washington. It started in a gym, a church gymnasium in Toledo, Ohio. Linoleum floors, folding chairs, bad acoustics. Crockett stood at the front of a town hall, taking rapid-fire questions from voters. Infrastructure, border policy, veteran care. Then a woman in the back, mid-50s, tired face, sharp eyes, raised her hand. The cameras were already rolling. "Why do judges keep making decisions that hurt us?" she asked. "Even when we vote for change." The room went quiet. Crockett didn't flinch. "Because too many judges don't fear the people anymore," she said. "Some of them think they're untouchable. Some of them are." She said the thing no one else would, and she didn't stop there. She spoke on lifetime appointments, political influence dressed in robes, and courtrooms where justice depended on your net worth. She referenced real cases: Oklahoma, Texas, Indiana. No yelling, no theatrics, just a calm, surgical dismantling of the lie that the system was working as designed. The clip went viral within hours. Networks picked it up. Conservative pundits lost their minds. Dangerous. Disrespectful. An attack on the judiciary. By the next morning, Crockett's office had over 900 calls. Most of them were threats, demanding she retract her words, resign, apologize. She didn't. She posted the full video herself, then followed up with more, citing court records, past misconduct, ethical breaches ignored. This wasn't noise. She brought facts. She brought fire. And the system panicked. Within 72 hours, headlines shifted. Supreme Court may weigh in on. Crockett comments. Chief Justice considers disciplinary measures. Nobody could remember the last time the Supreme Court publicly responded to a sitting member of Congress. Not like this. Then came the bombshell. An official notice from the U.S. Judicial Oversight Commission. Crockett had been summoned to appear at a special contempt hearing in St. Louis, Missouri. Presiding authority, Justice Elena Kagan. It made no sense. Supreme Court justices don't handle hearings like this. It reeked of politics. But the notice was real. Crockett's legal team advised her to stay away. Issue a statement. Let it play out from a distance. She refused. She booked a one-way ticket. No lawyers, no press. Just her, a navy blue suit, and a folder full of receipts. That night, in a cheap hotel off Lindell Boulevard, rain tapping against the window, she stayed up reviewing every bill she'd co-sponsored, every speech, every interview, every time she'd told the truth, knowing it would cost her. She wasn't preparing to defend herself. She was preparing to put the entire system on trial. And across town, Justice Kagan wasn't sleeping either. Known for her pragmatism, her calm, her careful words, Kagan had serious concerns. Not because Crockett had lied, but because she hadn't. And that truth? It was hitting a nerve the court had spent decades pretending didn't exist. By morning, the courthouse steps were lined with protesters. Some waved flags. Others held signs. Truth is not contempt. No gag on Crockett. Reporters huddled under umbrellas. This wasn't just a hearing anymore. It was a reckoning. Inside, the federal courtroom was packed. No cameras, no phones. Just eyes, notepads, and tension. At exactly 9 a.m., the doors opened. Jasmine Crockett stepped in. No heels. No designer coat. Just flat shoes and a steady gait. She didn't look like someone under fire. She looked like someone clocking in. She took her seat at the table without glancing at the gallery. The clock announced the hearing. In the matter of public contempt proceedings regarding Representative Jasmine Crockett. Then the door behind. The bench opened. Justice Elena Kagan entered, the same black robe. But in this smaller chamber it looked heavier, like it carried history and doubt. She didn't look at the gallery. She looked directly at Crockett, and Crockett didn't blink. The two women locked eyes across the room. No fear, no apology. Then Kagan spoke. Representative Crockett, you stand here today, accused of conduct unbecoming of an elected official. Statements which, in the court's view, may have incited a breach of public trust and called into question the legitimacy of the judiciary. Without due cause, a murmur passed through the gallery, but Crockett just sat still, back straight, hands folded, waiting, not to be judged, but to be heard. And whether this hearing was a warning, a spectacle, or something far more dangerous, one thing was already clear. She wasn't on trial for lying. She was on trial for telling the truth. This proceeding is not criminal in nature, Justice Kagan said, her tone even but unmistakably firm. But it carries weight. Contempt, even indirect, can erode the very institutions we all depend on. She paused, then added with quiet finality, You may present your case. You may speak freely. That last sentence shifted the room. Speak freely wasn't just permission. It was an invitation, a door Kagan had left open, wide. Crockett stood slowly, both palms pressed against the table. Justice Kagan, she began, voice steady. I won't insult you by pretending I didn't know my words thus would hit hard. I chose them because they needed to hit, and I stand by them. A murmur rustled through the gallery. A man in the war back coughed into his fist. I'm not here to play defense, she continued. I'm here to make something plain. If telling the truth is punishable now, then this hearing isn't about justice. It's about control. Kagan's face didn't move, but her eyes tightened slightly. You may proceed with your defense, she said. What followed wasn't a speech. It wasn't a performance. It was something colder, sharper, the slow, precise dismantling of the case against her. Crockett opened her folder. Pages of notes, court rulings, highlighted statutes. She began listing facts, dates, quotes, documented ethical violations by federal judges. No rumors, no guesses, just receipts. And as her voice filled the courtroom, something began to shift. She wasn't just defending herself anymore. She was asking everyone in that room, especially Kagan, to take a hard look at the system they'd all sworn to uphold. Then Kagan leaned forward slightly, her fingers steepled. Congresswoman, she said, voice composed but edged with steel. You've made serious claims about our judiciary, about your colleagues on the bench, and yet you sit here without legal counsel. Why? Crockett didn't flinch. Because I don't need a lawyer to tell the truth, she said. I just need the room to hear it. Gasps rippled through the gallery. Not outrage. Recognition. She'd crossed a line, yes, but she might have just landed a punch. Kagan didn't react. Truth without discipline is chaos, she said coolly. The judiciary does not answer to emotion or popularity. Crockett stepped from the table into the center of the room. And that, she said, is part of the problem. You hear someone like me, and you assume emotional, reckless, unruly, unfit. She paused. But I spent 3 nights cross-referencing judicial behavior reports. I read every code of conduct for federal judges. I memorized the 2009 ruling in Hartley v. Verdun's, where a sitting judge accepted gifts from a defense firm and never saw a single consequence. She let the silence stretch. You think I'm being reckless? I'm being methodical, Justice. Kagan looked down briefly at her notes, then back at Crockett. I know what contempt is, Crockett continued. It's not saying what's true. It's pretending nothing's wrong when everything is, and I refuse to pretend. A journalist in the back scribbled furiously. Kagan shifted in her chair. This court recognizes your preparation, she said. But the issue isn't whether judicial problems exist. It's whether your comments, broadcast nationally, deliberately undermined public faith in the courts. She paused. You're a public servant. Your words carry weight. What if someone had acted violently, citing your statements? There it was. The subtext finally spoken aloud. Crockett didn't raise her voice. Then maybe, she said, you should ask yourself why the system is so fragile that one congresswoman's words could shake it. The room froze. Maybe the public's faith isn't collapsing because I said something, she added. Maybe it's collapsing because too many like me have stayed silent. Kagan folded her hands, eyes narrowed. This isn't a campaign rally. I know, Crockett said. That's why I'm not pandering. I'm challenging you. And every judge more concerned with their image than with access, accountability, or the Constitution. Now the atmosphere had changed entirely. No fidgeting, no whispers. This wasn't a reprimand. It was a reckoning, a constitutional standoff, not between branches of government, but between 2 women, fluent in the law and unafraid of fire. Kagan broke the silence. Do you believe you're above the law? Crockett returned to her seat. No, she said. But I don't think you are either, the sentence echoed. Clean, quiet, devastating. Kagan's gaze dropped, not in surrender, but in thought. She tapped her pen once, then stopped. She looked up again. This is not a forum for political martyrdom. Good, Crockett said, because I didn't come here to die on a hill. I came to stop us from burying people under them. Not a sound in the courtroom. This wasn't a meltdown. This wasn't a performance. This was a precise, fearless challenge, directed squarely at a system that had never been forced to answer for itself. And Justice Kagan knew it too. The real trial had only just begun. But Jasmine Crockett wasn't finished. Not even close. She reached into her case file and slid out a fresh stack of documents, neatly clipped, dated, methodically organized. No speeches, no theories, she said, walking to the center of the courtroom. Just facts. She handed a copy to the clerk, who delivered them to the bench. Justice Kagan accepted the file, eyes scanning the first page. The room was so silent, the soft creak of leather chairs shifting was deafening. These, Crockett said clearly, her voice carrying without rising, are just a few cases, all from the last 10 years. Federal judges who broke ethics rules, who made public endorsements, who dismissed complaints while holding financial ties. Not one was sanctioned, not one removed, and in most cases the public never even knew, because the investigation stayed sealed. She let that hang in the air for a beat. In March 2017, she continued, Judge Lynn Bosworth in Kansas City failed to recuse herself from a case involving a developer who had donated to her campaign. Her excuse? She forgot. The complaint was dismissed. Quietly. Flip. Next page. In October 2021, Judge Arthur Meenan in Las Vegas attended a private fundraiser hosted by a law firm, while actively presiding over a class action involving that same firm. He didn't recuse. He ruled in their favor. Still, Kagan said nothing. She read on. "These aren't exceptions," Crockett said. "They're patterns. They're not rare. They're just buried. And when someone like me talks about them out loud, I'm the threat? I'm the danger to the system?" Crockett walked back toward the table but didn't sit. She looked Kagan directly in the eye. "You want to talk about undermining public trust?" she said. "Then let's start there." Kagan leaned back slowly, lips drawn into a tight line. "The court is not blind to misconduct, Congresswoman," Crockett's voice sharpened. "But it is deaf to accountability. You know it. I know it. Hell, every law student in this room knows it." She opened another folder. "This is a signed letter from a whistleblower inside the Office of Judicial Integrity," she said. "They were instructed to delay processing 2 misconduct complaints because the judges were close to retirement. Didn't want to tarnish their legacy." She handed it to the clerk. The courtroom stirred louder this time. Kagan flipped through the letter, her brow furrowed. Still, she gave no answer. "I'm not saying the courts are worthless," Crockett said. "I'm saying they're human, and pretending they're not, that they're untouchable, creates silence, and silence kills trust." A man in the third row nodded. A woman near the front pressed her hand to her mouth. "I didn't come here to destroy the court," Crockett added. "I came to remind it why it exists." She scanned the gallery, then locked eyes with Kagan again. "You might not like how I said it, but don't pretend I'm wrong about what I said." Kagan looked down again. Her fingers flipped through the letter, paused on a name, Judge Ivan Brewster, then moved on, a quiet exhale. Controlled, but heavy. "This is substantial," Kagan said at last. Crockett remained standing. "That's not even half of it." For the first time since the hearing began, something shifted on the bench. Not weakness, not concession, just hesitation. The moment where the narrative stopped being about decorum and became about reckoning. And into that pause, Crockett stepped forward and asked the most dangerous question of the morning. "What are you willing to do about it?" The courtroom froze. Kagan didn't answer right away. She stared down at the papers, not reading. Just still, as though weighing the full gravity of what had just been asked. Then she spoke. "You're not the first to question the system, Representative Crockett," she said quietly. "But most who do don't bring classified material into my courtroom." Crockett didn't flinch. "They're not classified," she said. "They're internal memos, unsealed, unprotected, and vetted by constitutional lawyers before I ever walked through those doors." Kagan raised her eyes. "And the transcript?" That word turned the air electric. Every head in the room turned. The tension stretched thin. Crockett reached into her file one final time and pulled out a manila envelope. She didn't offer it yet. "This," she said, holding it with both hands, "is a transcript from a sealed arbitration hearing, dated February 12th, 2020. She looked directly at Kagan. In it, a sitting federal judge was recorded advising a private legal team on how to phrase their settlement offer so it would appear neutral in court. That same judge later ruled in their favor. Now the whispers had returned. A ripple of tension moved through the gallery. Someone in the back scribbled furiously into a legal pad. The bailiff glanced toward the bench, uncertain whether to step in. Justice Kagan straightened in her seat. "How did you obtain it?" "I won't disclose the source." Crockett replied. "But I can confirm it was never supposed to be sealed." She took a step closer to the bench. Under federal arbitration rules, the seal was applied retroactively, without legal justification, only after media inquiries started coming in. "You want to discipline me for speaking up?" she asked, eyes locked on Kagan. "Then say it. Say it on the record. But let's not pretend this is about protocol." I broke the silence, and now it's inconvenient. Kagan took the envelope. Her fingers hovered at the flap, hesitating. She looked up, long and hard, and for the first time her expression shifted, not with frustration, not with judgment, but with doubt. "This transcript," she said quietly, "if authenticated, could suggest multiple breaches of judicial ethics." "It's already been authenticated," Crockett said, "by 2 former legal clerks and a court reporter who was fired shortly after without explanation." Kagan lowered her eyes, reading the opening lines. Her face stayed composed, but something beneath it cracked. She closed the envelope slowly and set it down. "This court is now in recess," she said. 15 minutes. A collective exhale rippled through the courtroom as the bailiff made the announcement. The gallery stood, some confused, others visibly shaken. They didn't know if they'd just witnessed a reckoning or the start of something much bigger. Crockett returned to her seat, took a sip from her water bottle. Her hands didn't tremble. Across the room, Kagan rose and disappeared through the side door behind the bench, her robe trailing behind her. She didn't speak to anyone on her way out. In the corridor beyond the courtroom, she stopped. A legal advisor approached, whispering something urgent. She raised a hand. Not now. Inside, her private chambers, Kagan stood alone. The transcript sat on the desk. Beside it, the whistleblower letter, the sealed complaints, and Crockett's calm, relentless voice echoing in her memory. She sat, opened the envelope again. Read. The language was surgical, measured, precise. The judge's voice, clear on the recording, hadn't pursued justice. He'd coached strategy. The implications weren't just serious. They were seismic. And for the first time in years, Elena Kagan didn't feel like the final voice in the room. She felt like someone standing in the middle of something, spiraling beyond her control. Because what happens when a judge begins questioning her own judgment? When Kagan returned to the courtroom, something had shifted. It no longer felt like a disciplinary hearing. It felt like a room holding its breath. Crockett stood as Kagan did, not out of fear, out of respect. The gallery followed. Kagan didn't begin with a ruling. Instead, she removed her reading glasses and set them on the bench. Then she spoke, not as a jurist commanding a courtroom, but as a woman facing a far more personal reckoning. "Before we continue," she said, "I want to ask you something, Congresswoman. Off the record." A long pause. Crockett blinked, then gave a small nod. Kagan looked at her. "Why now?" she asked. "You've had this information. You've been in office for years. Why bring it here, to me?" Crockett inhaled slowly. "Because I didn't think it would matter before," she said. "I thought it would get buried. Like everything else. But when I saw your name assigned to this hearing, I thought maybe you'd listen." Kagan studied her. "You think I'm fair?" "I think you were," Crockett replied. "And maybe you still are. But even good judges turn into guardians of the system, if they stay in it long enough." Silence. Even the court clerk stopped typing. Kagan didn't respond right away. She folded her hands and let the moment settle. "You remind me of someone," she said quietly. "Me. Before the confirmations. Before I became the one expected to keep the temperature down." She paused. I've spent the last 15 years choosing my words carefully, balancing risk and responsibility, and somewhere in that, I stopped, speaking from conviction, and started speaking from position. Crockett didn't interrupt. She just listened. Kagan turned to the gallery, rows of eyes unmoving. The courts weren't built to survive untouched by criticism, she said. But when criticism becomes noise, we stop listening. What you brought today isn't noise. It's a wound. She looked back at Crockett. You called us out because you could, but also because you had to. Crockett glanced down at her, notes, then back up. I've seen too many people get swallowed up trying to play nice, she said. If I go out telling the truth. Her voice was raw now, not angry, just tired. The kind of fatigue worn only by those who've fought too long and too alone. Kagan leaned forward. I can't fix everything you've uncovered, she said, but I can make sure this hearing doesn't end the way it began. Crockett's shoulders dropped, not in triumph, but in something closer to release. Then maybe, she said softly, we both did our jobs today. For a moment, no one moved. It didn't feel like a courtroom anymore. It felt like a conversation, long overdue, between two people who had finally found someone else, who understood what it cost to keep going. She understood the weight of it. Justice Kagan lifted the gavel but didn't bring it down. Before I issue a decision, she said, her voice steady, I'll allow one final statement for the record. Crockett rose. Her gaze swept across the room. Faces she didn't know, and some she'd never forget. She didn't raise her voice. She didn't perform. I love this country, she said. That's why I speak up. I love the law. That's why I won't pretend it's perfect. And I believe in justice. But belief without confrontation is just faith without work. If that's contempt, so be it, she said. Justice Kagan nodded once, then turned back to the bench. But a decision still had to be made. Her hand hovered near the gavel, but didn't touch it. This court has reviewed the submitted documents, she said, her tone reverting to formal, though softer than before. It has considered sworn statements and evaluated the material's relevance to current judicial ethics. She paused, eyes sweeping the gallery. Representative Crockett did not come here seeking celebration, nor did she offer apology. She came with accusations, and with evidence. She turned slightly, meeting Crockett's eyes. Your statements were pointed, politically charged, but they were not baseless. And as a public official speaking on matters of public concern, your words are protected. Murmurs rippled through the gallery, this time filled with electricity. Crockett closed her eyes, inhaled, exhaled, still. Therefore, Kagan continued, this court finds no sufficient grounds to proceed with contempt charges. A single clap broke out from the back. It stopped abruptly, uncertain of the moment's rules. Kagan paused. She wasn't finished. However, she said, her tone shifting, this hearing has revealed deeper fractures, ones far beyond a single infraction. Accordingly, I will be issuing a formal judicial memorandum recommending a full federal ethics review. She tapped the envelope beside her, the one Crockett had handed her. These documents, she said, will be submitted to the appropriate oversight bodies, without redaction. Now the room wasn't murmuring. It was silent, stunned. Kagan set the gavel down, not slammed, just placed. This hearing is concluded. She stood. The clerk stood. The bailiff stood. But the gallery remained seated, motionless, like any movement might shatter the moment. Crockett gathered her folder slowly, her movements measured. She stood and turned. Made eye contact with reporters, law students, even a former judge who'd once dismissed her as unqualified. No one spoke, but their eyes said everything. Outside, the crowd surged. Cameras flickered to life. Microphones jutted forward like weapons. "Congresswoman, do you feel vindicated?" Someone shouted. She paused. At the top of the courthouse steps. "This wasn't about vindication," she said. "This was about truth, and it's not over." She descended the steps as the chaos swallowed her. Back inside, Kagan sat alone in her chambers, her robe draped on the chair behind her. The documents lay open on her desk. The transcript stared. Up at her, each word a sharp indictment of what happens when silence becomes standard. A knock. Her assistant peeked in. "The press is asking for a statement." Kagan didn't look up. No comment. The door clicked shut. She folded her hands in her lap. The hearing haunted her. Not because of how it ended, but because of what it forced her to see. She'd spent years defending the court from outside. Attacks. Only to realize the rot had started from within. Meanwhile, across town, Crockett sat in her rental car, her folders stacked on the seat beside her. She stared through the windshield at the courthouse. No smile. No triumph. This was all just part one. She picked up her phone and dialed. "I need to talk to the Oversight Committee," she said. "Today. Not next week. We're not waiting anymore." She hung up, glanced in the rearview mirror. Her face was tired, but resolved. Even victory leaves a mark. A week later, Jasmine Crockett sat alone in her D.C. office. The evening sun cast an amber hue across her desk, strewn with half-open documents and highlighter-streaked margins. Outside her window, the Capitol dome stood unmoved. But something had shifted, not just in the system, in her. The headlines had faded. The media had moved on to polls, scandals, celebrity divorces. Her face had been front-page news for 3 days, then vanished. She didn't care. She leaned back in her chair, staring at the ceiling, thinking about power, about truth, about how easily people are ignored when they say what no one wants to hear. A knock. Her legislative aide stepped in, holding a thick envelope. "This came by hand," she said. "From Justice Kagan's office." Crockett opened it slowly. Inside, a letter. Formal in appearance, personal in tone. "I may not have agreed with your method, but I cannot deny the necessity of your message. You forced a conversation many of us have avoided for too long. For that, I owe you more than a ruling. No. Signature. Just Elena Kagan, typed at the bottom." Crockett folded the letter, set it aside. She didn't need validation, but she could admit. It meant something. A crack in the wall, however small, still a start. She stood, walked to the small whiteboard by her window. The question at the top hadn't changed in months. What are we doing that actually matters? She picked up a dry erase marker and wrote beneath it, pushing. Even when it gets you punished. Her phone buzzed again. Oversight committee calls, emails piling up, journalists asking for follow-ups, and one voicemail from a first-year law student in Arizona. Watching that hearing made me believe again in people who fight smart. Jasmine smiled faintly. This wasn't the kind of win you parade. It was quiet, messy, heavy. But it was real, and real change never comes dressed in celebration. It comes bruised, challenged, followed by silence, when the cameras are gone, and the real work begins. She returned to her desk, picked up her phone, hit record. A habit for late-night thoughts. Some turned into speeches, most didn't. "I don't care if they called it a victory," she said into the mic. "This wasn't about winning. It was about forcing the system to look itself in the face. And I'll do it again, every time. Because if fear of consequence stops us, we've already lost. She saved the recording, set the phone down. In the end, it was never about her. It was about everyone watching, wondering if they could speak up, wondering if it mattered. To them, she had only one message. Speak when your voice shakes, when the room is full of power and privilege, when silence feels safer. Speak, because silence keeps things easy, and easy doesn't change anything.